Hello there folks, and welcome to something a little bit different today. Now, if you've watched the channel for any stretch of time, you'll probably have seen that I have done quite a few 3D printed miniatures on the channel. And a question that comes up fairly regularly is, well, which printer did you use? Now, almost constantly, the answer is a Mars printer from Elegoo, because I have had one of every single one of the Mars lines since they came out. I had the Mars 2 Pro, and am now running a Mars 5 Ultra, with the regular versions in between. But the team at Elegoo very kindly got in touch and asked if I'd be interested in giving my thoughts on the Saturn 4 Ultra. And they sent that along, and they said, let us know what you think, and hopefully it's good. And I'll front load this little review by saying, yeah, actually, it is. We'll talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons. There are one or two tiny little issues. Not even issues, just things that would be nice if they were slightly different. But for the most part, I've had a really good time printing with it. I've been running it almost constantly for the better part of a month, and I haven't had a single failed print after running my calibrations. So that's a pretty strong recommend from me. But the question ultimately is, why would you want to go for a Saturn rather than a Mars line? Now, the easiest way to show you that will be in the Cheeto Box Slicer. But first of all, let's take a look at the machine. So real quick, the product page for the Saturn 4. Now I'm going to link to this in the description so that you can check out the specifications yourself. A little bit of scrolling here will take you down to the option to look at the specs. Easy as that. Now the build volume here is the big selling point. The difference between this and the Mars is quite pronounced, and I'll show you that in a second. Now, as well as the build volume, one of the things that's neat about the Ultra stuff is the automatic leveling. Now, I have not had any issues with it. I have heard folks have had one or two problems having to manually adjust the build plate once, but once it is sorted, that should be fine. I haven't had any problems with it at all. The moment that I ran calibrations, it was printing perfectly, so I can't complain on that front. It is worth checking out a couple of Reddit threads if you do have any concerns about it, but like I said, no problem for me. And the other bit here, smart mechanical sensor. This little trick saved me from actually ruining this machine because I had forgotten to take a print of a whole bunch of heads off of the build plate and tried starting a new print. And it detected that, it stopped the print, and it sent me a little warning saying, hey, are you sure about that? And I wasn't sure. It turned out I'd made a grievous error, but luckily it stopped everything. There wasn't even a dent in the FEP. So that one's pretty groovy. That definitely has been nice. I haven't had an opportunity, or I haven't thought to test the power loss printing. I'm quite lucky that power here is relatively stable, so that's not much of a selling point for me. But if you live somewhere where that's an issue, then okay, might be worth checking that out. Now, one other thing to look at here is the net weight, because 15 kilograms, that is, well, 14.5, that is big. Obviously, it's not a huge problem, but it does mean if you are setting up your Saturn 4 somewhere, it needs to be in a relatively stable, sturdy table of some description. But with that weight comes its size, and the size of that build plate is really what I think sells this over one of the Mars line. So, let's crack open Cheeto Box. And here I am using Cheeto Box Basic. I have found it really easy to use, no problems here for me. And down the bottom here you'll see that I've got set up both a Mars 5 Ultra and the Saturn 4 Ultra. So here we're looking at the build plate for the Mars 5. So what I'm going to do is grab a bunch of miniatures and just pop those on the build plate, looking at it from the perspective of a wargamer. What am I likely to print? I want big squads, I want a tank or two, that sort of thing. So, once these guys are finished loading in, I am going to auto-arrange. Now, it is worth pointing out, you can stuff these build plates full. It's very easy just to, nudge these guys a few millimeters either way, and I can tell you from experience that you will get a whole squad of 10 guys and their arms on the Mars 5 build plate, which is not too bad. Being able to print 10 guys at a time with their weapons, nice. But what if we go down here and we click the Saturn 4? That is a big boy. That is a big build plate. So what I'm going to do is actually select all of these guys, and let's go ahead and copy them. So 10 men to 20 men. And we can still get the arms on there. Or, why don't we print out, say, 30 bodies at a time? Oh, can we fit more on there? Goodness me. So after a bit of experimenting, there are 45 bodies on here, and there are gaps in between each. You could, if you were determined, start wedging these guys together and really cram the build plate full. But I think being able to demonstrate 45 bodies in one fell swoop, you could then print the arms on the next build plate. This is where the Saturn IV shines. But it doesn't just have to be infantry. So let's go ahead and clear the build plate. And then here we have a 28mm, so a 156 scale M60 tank. This thing is huge. You'll see here, this tiny little blip of red, that is technically the raft over the edge of the build plate. But it's going to print fine, trust me, I can tell you that from experience. This thing is huge, and you can fit a whole tank on one build plate. So, that's kind of crazy. And of course, it doesn't just have to be wargaming miniatures. I have printed things like decorations, a couple of dragons and stuff for around the house. Mrs. Sledge likes dragons, and I can't blame her. But this wonderful machine has been an absolute doddle to use. Really very simple. Now, of course, you will get a little pop-up that says, hey, remember that tiny blip of red? But we're going to go ahead and print it anyway. Now, I'm not going to hit print because I know that there's something already on the build plate which we need to go and take off now. So let's go and get an actual look at the machine itself. So here you can get a look at the sheer size of the thing. To the left there is the Mars 5, and in the center is our Colossus, the Saturn. I'm just popping my gloves on, making sure, hey, I know that guy. Making sure everything's going to be safe. And here at the touchscreen at the front, what I'm doing is raising the build plate before I go ahead and take it off, just to make sure that there's plenty of space at the bottom of the print where I'm not going to knock anything off. Now this is a really neat little device. As well, the fact that it keeps the resin heated while it's printing, and the motion of the build plate will keep it essentially stirring, is really handy. So what I wanted to briefly touch on is if we go ahead here and lift off the lid from the Mars, you'll see this is how these have always come off, just a single piece of plastic that pops off the top, nice and simple, very easy, but once you've lifted it away, you need to find somewhere to put it. Whereas, with the Saturn, this really funky little machine, it all lifts off and it's hinged at the top, so with one hand you can just push it open, simple as that. I find it really useful not having to find somewhere to put the lid when I'm working in this sort of space, especially given the size of the thing. It is one downside in the fact that it requires quite a bit of clearance though, so bear that one in mind when you're looking for a space to set up your Saturn IV, because that extra bit of room it needs to open up is going to make a difference. But then, as promised, a couple of the prints. You'll see I've been messing around with the mix on some of the some of the resins I've been using. I've got the M48, I've got a T55, and up close you can see the sheer amount of detail that you still get out of this device. It's really handy to have. Now picking up the Stuart here, you can see up close, absolutely perfect in the details. Once this guy's painted, he's going to look the business. So yeah, can't argue with the end results. And I have also been painting other things too. A lot of what you would have seen on the channel recently has actually come off of the Saturn IV. And so there you have it. Now the sun has come out while I've been recording, so it might look a little bit funny here, but the printer itself, yeah, I'm honestly really impressed. As somebody who has been printing for a while and has had a bunch of different machines, the Saturn IV, detail is amazing, it's easy to use. The downsides to 3D printing are still there, so if you're not someone who's got, the patience for iterative testing or calibrating things, or working out some really weird problems if they do crop up, well, printing is still another hobby by itself. But if you are a wargamer and you're looking at something which will let you churn out huge armies in no time at all, this Saturn IV, yeah, definitely gets my vote. I've been really impressed with it, very lucky to have one, so thank you again to the team at Elegoo for sending one along, and yeah, thumbs up from me. Both, in fact, whenever I can spare them. So yeah, any questions or anything, do drop them in the comments below, because I don't think I've covered quite everything, but the machine itself is fairly self-explanatory, and same too, that product page will probably have a few more bits of information that you might want. All the same, I'm now going to go paint an M60, an M48. I can never quite remember the difference between the, the American tanks of the Cold War, but I've got a few to print. So, thanks very much for your time, folks. You all enjoy the rest of your day.